Welcome to the Fort Collins Fellows Podcast, from Colorado State University to New Belgium Brewery, and the hundreds of miles of hiking and biking trails. Fort Collins has earned its well-deserved reputation as one of the top places to live in the United States. Join the fellas as they uncover the stories, places, and people that make Fort Collins so extraordinary.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Fort Collins Fellows Podcast. With me, as always, is Patrick Soukup. You can't even talk today, Patrick. And we have a great guest with us today. Put on your gardening hats, folks, because we're going to be talking flowers today. We're going to be talking flowers. We've been looking forward to this. A lot of people that are from Fort Collins or just moving here know about the trial gardens over at CSU. And so with us, we have Dr. Chad Miller. He runs the flower trial gardens at CSU, and you are the assistant professor of landscape horticulture. Did I get that right, Chad?
You got it right. There's a lot in there. Well, we'll roll with it.
We're going to roll with it. Wait, even if it's not that's what we're going with. Well, listen, thanks so much for joining us today. You know, I'm one of the lucky ones. I live literally 2 blocks from the flower gardens, and I'm over there at least once a week with my family or with my dog. And let's just get started with your background. You're fairly new to Fort Collins. It sounds like you just moved here a few months ago, but give our listeners a little background of who you are, where you came from, and we'll dive into the flower gardens and your love for flowers and horticulture, and we'll go from there.
Perfect. Was this a 3-hour show?
Titanic plus some.
Okay, perfect. I mean, I can go on. Again, as you talk to any of the students, they'll be like, wow, he doesn't shut up. So yes, you're correct. I recently relocated here back. It was a week before Christmas last year. So we're moving into about 8 months total. I guess maybe best to start way back. I'm originally from Wisconsin, northwest Wisconsin. So just outside of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, which is in Minnesota, of course, but it's usually a good benchmark where
cities.
Folks.
Love Twin
cities. I honestly do too. So I appreciate the call. My partner doesn't. So that was the reason why we also didn't go back that way. But hey, and so I grew up there. My family, so I'm in agriculture, horticulture. My family, my dad's side of the family, were in agriculture. They were dairy farmers. Go figure, Wisconsin. And so that's how I was kind of embedded in agriculture. And then, it was probably, early teens, even a little bit before that, a neighbor got me hooked on plants. My mom had done gardening, and so I always found out I liked horticulture. Was it going to be horticulture or art or teaching or some combination thereof? And so I had a great mentor and went to Wisconsin River Falls for my 4-year bachelor's degree. Madison also has horticulture, but so does River Falls, and they were close in the backyard. And so being a first generation college student, it was close to home. I didn't have to go too far from the family. And so I did that. I got an international experience in there. And so I went and did an internship in the Netherlands. And so I should probably back up, and embedded with this is I love bulbs. So plants and flowers, I love bulbs, tulips, daffodils.
This ties in perfect with our Palmer Flowers episode earlier.
Yeah. Yes. So I fell in love with the Netherlands, and then it just made it even more gung-ho to go on for a master's and PhD. Never really thought about that. My undergrad advisor was like, hey, you probably have the skills to do it. And I was like, wow, God, somebody else sees it. And so I went on to get a master's. Never thought I'd get a PhD, but embedded with that was teaching at a university, and generally, PhD is helpful in that situation. So went out to Cornell for both a master's and PhD. Quick note to that, I actually interviewed here at CSU for a graduate position. And so it was with Dr. Newman and Dr. Hartley, and ultimately ended up at Cornell, mostly because there was a bulb researcher there, or a couple of them. And so love of bulbs. Somebody does work with bulbs, which is few and far between. Probably that was a good choice, right? So did both those degrees out there. In between, did another sort of what I call a student sabbatic in the Netherlands in 2 research labs and tulip breeding and lily breeding and such. And then I finished up finally and ended up landing a job at Kansas State University in Manhattan. And so I was there right out of grad school until just last December. Actually, I finished teaching my course 3 days before we moved. So
nice.
Yeah. Well, nice. You see some of this gray in here? That was part of that.
I'd take the gray.
Yeah, understandable. You should.
Chad, yeah, we got to be careful who we're talking to here. You know?
Right. I forget there are people with pictures up here. I can actually see who I'm talking to, right? So was at K-State for 12 and a half years, and I had a heavy teaching appointment there. So it was 80% of my time was theoretically devoted to teaching, and the other balance of 20% was doing research. And so it was focused on landscape plants, flowers, horticulture. And so my true degree programs were more like floriculture, so greenhouse production, flowering plants. But basically, I kind of tossed myself into I'm a plant geek, plant lover. So that's landscape, that's greenhouse, that's cut flower, that's all the above. So did a lot of teaching there, taught ID courses there, plant propagation and things like that. And then this job opened up. And so having interviewed here, knew about the trial gardens. One of my initial thoughts about graduate school and professional career was being a plant breeder. And so I've always appreciated new plants and trialing plants. And so when this position opened, I was like, well, that would be pretty interesting and pretty amazing. And so just applied and so came to realize on the plane, flew out for the interview in April, and it was basically 20 years to the week that I had visited for graduate school, and then 20 years later was interviewing for a completely different position with a little money. And a little more responsibility.
They're gonna pay you this time.
Yes, just a little more. So interviewed, and it was a really good fit. And of course, obviously, the department thought it was a good fit, and so here I am.
Really, we're lucky to have you, Chad. We Cornell and Patrick, we got a good one at the Trial Gardens.
Well, I hope so. Well, we'll let the people do the talking and the people do the evaluating. I'm going to try to do my job as best as I can. So.
Well, talk to us about that. Give us a little background if you can. If you're not familiar with Trial Gardens at CSU, what is it? Where to get it start? And why is it so special here in Fort Collins?
Yep. No, absolutely. This is a great opportunity to share the background of it. And so my predecessor, Dr. Jim Klett, was here for over 40 years. And a lot of folks in town may recognize or understand the Plant Environmental Research Center, or PERC as they called it, which used to be like the greenhouse and research plots that were in the center of campus essentially, where the current stadium is, right? And so when the stadium was going to be built there, we relocated things. And so the trials have been going on for well over 3-ish decades or so, at least some level of trial. Okay. And where they're currently at was they moved over there in year 2000. So we're about 23 years in the process over there in front of the old Fort Collins High School and what used to be a Fort Collins City Park. And so there was, long story short, a land swap and agreement that area would become CSU property with trials, and there are stipulations that we have to have color in there, and it's open to the public and everything like that. And so we have the annual trials, and then also just across Remington, right immediately in front of UCA, are perennial trials. And then if you just jump a little bit north on Remington, corner of Remington and Pitkin, are the perennial demonstration gardens. And so there's a whole slew of gardens out there with some artwork in there. And, ideally the goal is to have that become the garden art district of Fort Collins, or, find opportunities to expand that. So to cut to more of what the trials are and what all that entails is, so there are horticultural companies, breeders, marketers that bring new plants to the market. And so not every plant works well in every landscape. And so where we are here in the Intermountain West and, the Front Range, a high desert steppe area, lots of different terms that would mean essentially the same thing. Basically high light intensity, very dry air, temperature swings between day and night, hail. We can go down the list, right? And
you on the web. There's a great breakdown on the website. Yeah, it kind of
yes, yeah, and there is the website flowertrials.com.
We'll have a link to this in our show notes for everybody.
Okay, perfect. And so this gives us an opportunity, gives the breeders an opportunity, and the plant marketers an opportunity they pay us to trial these plants. And so we start them in the greenhouse, either by seed or by a cutting, and then grow them to a nice size. And depending on the weather, we get them out there, and then we culture them to hopefully give a good general idea of how these plants would perform here in this climate or this area.
Chad, how often are you rotating? Like, when you bring new ones in, like what is that ratio of, existing to new?
Yep. So the plot of land, the spot between Remington and College is technically the annual trial garden. It's about 2-ish acres. That annual garden every year is turned over for the most part.
Oh. I mean, and first of all, for the listeners out there who haven't seen, they need to go check this out. I mean, it's phenomenal, and especially this year.
Yes, I would argue every year.
I would too. You're right. My bad.
Come on, Chris. Watch what you're saying.
It's fair. It's fair. There's one. I'll let you have that one.
Yeah, that's right.
But usually about 4th of July or so until, right now we're starting to get on the tail end because everything, it's an annual. Everything has its time, and they're some are doing quite well and will continue to do well all the way until we get our first frost to freeze situation. But back to your question, that center core area of the annual trial garden is turned over every year. And so you hop the street again to Remington, and to the east side there is the perennial trials, a little less acreage, a little less numbers, but those are in there for 3 years. So they'll have 3 growing summers with the 2 winters in there. So the perennials are plants that would naturally come back every year. And so those are, we're stuck with them unless they die, which is okay. Usually the plant breeders don't want to see that, but hey, that's the whole purpose of a trial. And they're in there for upwards of 2 to 3 years. And so just to give you a little bit of scope on that, feel free to stop me at any time to ask your question.
No, this is great. And I would, just for our viewers, because whenever I go to like Bath Nursery and Fort Collins Nursery, I always ask my wife, annuals, those are the ones that die every year, and perennials come back every year, right?
Yeah.
For the new gardeners out there. Okay.
Yep, that's our hope. And, there's the oddballs, with annuals that might reseed themselves, or if it's not a very terrible winter, or, as I talk with students, a lot of times with some plants, it's location. If you put them in just the right spot, it's a little warmer, it's a little more well drained in the soil as far as moisture. And so they might actually come back. Or if they're not in the right spot, they're definitely destined for death. So yeah, annuals, we are pretty much like, hey, one and done season. And the perennials are like, hey, we can put you in and kind of like let you just do your thing for a few years, for a decade or more. And so yes, that's a good point. To give you a little bit of scope about the number of plants, like in the annual trial garden this year, for example, which it's probably a good average, we're at right about 1,000 entries. So between all the pots that are out there and all the ground beds, give or take between 900 and 1,000, it varies per year, but that's right about the number that we're at. And that also includes if you hop the street again over in Remington on the south side, there's a little grouping of pots there as well.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, on that south west corner there. So give or take between 900 and 1,000 sort of entries, and then usually with each entry we put in several plants or repetitions. So we, if a few die, we at least have a few to keep looking at and taking data on. And there's roughly about 18 replications. So if you take about 18 times about 100 or 1,000, we're about 18-ish thousand plants that are planted in there every year. Wow. In a matter of about 2.5 to 3 weeks. So right about the time the semester ends, middle of May-ish, to the 1st of June is when we're, based on the weather, we can get out there, and we have a lot of volunteers. We have student workers that are out there, but we have a lot of master gardeners from Larimer and Weld counties that come to assist. That is very critical. And so, yeah, give or take about 18,000 plants go in that ground each year. And then that, they also got to come out at some level too. So there's some pretty intense work periods there, beginning and the end of the season.
Yeah, what's the ones that are in the pots? Because you have ones that are on the ground and they're kind of in that oval, that circle. What's the difference between the reason for the pots and the reason for just putting them on the ground?
Great question. So that's often dictated by the plant breeder or the plant marketing company that is, trying to sell the plant. There are some species that are really designed or bred for more potted plant culturing. That they would just prefer to grow them there, or whatever characteristic it might be, fits better in a potted situation. And then there are some that are more suited for the ground, but then there are some that work in both. And so the company that is submitting their entry may say, we'll do it both. I want to see how it does in the ground and how it does in a pot, right? And so there are cultural differences as far as like media and like inputs of how they're growing in a pot versus how they're growing in like native soil or in the ground situation.
It's amazing. Like this is stupid, but it's like it's a true trial. I mean, you're actually just figuring out what grows and what doesn't grow.
Well, I'm hearing entrance. Now, is this like the Westminster Dog Show where you choose winners at the end of the season of like different breeds? Like, hey, these are our potted tulips, and the winner is. These are our in-ground sunflowers, and the winner is.
You're exactly right. We have best of shows, right? And so
best in shows.
I've got a lot of like potential ideas for marketing and stuff. So I'm making this list of things like, oh, so we could do this and like jazz this up a little bit. But you're absolutely right. So to give a little context of how we get to the best ofs, we do take data and we do provide the entrance or the entry, the company's data of like average plant widths, heights, flowering, and then you may, if you were in town a couple of weeks ago, on the 5th of August, we had a public event. Yes. Yeah. And then on the 8th, we had the industry evaluation day. So we have 2 evaluation days. We invite the public on the Saturday. Anybody can come through. We'll give them flags, and they can put in their 3 flags for the 3 favorites. And actually, any visitor can do that essentially from the beginning of the season to the end. We have signs with QR codes where you can quickly vote for your favorites on the QR code or through the QR code. Or if you pick up a brochure in one of the 2 areas out there, you can actually physically write it and drop it back in the ballot box, and we count those. And so we're kind of in that process right now. We've got the data from that Saturday on August 5th. So we have like public evaluation winners because the public has slightly different eyes than, say, like a breeder or a greenhouse grower. Oftentimes they do overlap for some, because usually if it's a pretty plant, people recognize it. Doesn't matter if you're the breeder, the grower, or just, have a house around the corner. And then we have the other day, which is tailored to the industry, where we invite the folks that have entered the plants to come and see their products to help us rate. And so they get a subset, because we'd probably have to have 2 full days to have everybody go through every single trial entry out there. So they do a subset and they give their evaluation where they mark, the foliage looks nice, the flowers look nice, or there's not a lot, or looks like they're diseased, and then they can give us comments. And so we collate all those and we get average scores. And then we take those numbers from the industry day, and then we have an advisory committee where we have select folks that come back, which is going to happen in about a week and a half here. And
I just say August 29th, right? August 29th. Was that what your website says? The best of winners?
That's when we'll probably release some of that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But what we have coming up for the subset of the committee to look at is we take the top winners from all the averages and such, and we look at them about a month later just to look at them and go, was it kind of just a one-time thing or like a 1 or 2 week where they look really, really nice? So we'll go back to the top ones and go and look at them and evaluate them and say, hey, yeah, they've held up for a month and they still look really good. That does deserve the best of, kind of a thing. So it's kind of a check on ourselves to make sure they're there. Sorry, I was just looking. The best of things. So that should be the best of the winners 2023, the August 29th. That's part of the Twilight Garden series. That's next week.
Twilight Garden series.
Yeah. So that's what I'm learning. So if you go up to the top, the very top, it says Twilight Garden series right there.
Oh, I gotcha. Gotcha.
And that's that. So we will start talking a little bit about that next week.
The website's fantastic. By the way, I'm just going through it. And, I mean,
I appreciate that. I think there's lots of ways we can improve it too. And I'm getting feedback on that. And I'm definitely not a web designer by any means, but I want to have more interactive opportunities with it as well.
Sure.
So,
do you guys have, and do you guys have like kids that just come through and pull and destroy flowers because it's open to the public?
So one would guess we'd have, and I'm going to knock on wood on this, and I'm going to like cross fingers and everything you can't see here, right? Like one would think we'd have it more often than we do. Although
they always look great. I would think.
I think you're right. They always look great.
Thank you. And I haven't necessarily said it yet. It's not. I have several undergrads. We have a research associate, a lot of volunteers. I just help make sure things kind of get done. I get my hands out there and dirty too, but it's a team that does anything like that. It's a group. It's a team effort. So they should get a lot of the kudos for that. But we do have, especially early on when plants are just freshly planted, it's a little easier to get them out. And we have plants that find legs and they go walking. It's a double-edged sword because it's so widely open. It's also widely open for other people to see you doing it, right?
Right. You should have
very protective of it.
Yeah. Get the fraternity guys. Get that fraternity that's right across the street. Have those guys scout out.
To my knowledge, that's been a double-edged sword. So there may have been.
All right, rush week.
Who can I was going to rush week.
Flowers?
Yeah. Go find the best daisy you can.
So I'm told. Under my watch, it hasn't happened yet. The bottom line, yes, there have been vandalism and things like that have happened. But I think the best of humanity does start to come out in the sense of respect and like, man, this is nice, and let's not do anything with it. So
yeah, we
haven't had.
No. I was just sorry. I didn't mean to pivot or take you away from that. My apologies.
No.
I'm two things I want to hit on real quick was talking about these companies that are coming to you saying, hey, we want you to try. Like, who are these companies? Are they from around the world? Are they just native to Colorado because of the climate that they're trying to grow these particular flowers in? Yeah, tell us, where are these companies coming from?
Another great question. So to answer your question, they're coming from all over the world. We have
really,
and yeah, it gets a little.
Are you the one that gets to decide who gets to come?
I guess in the end, yes. But if they're throwing money
all right.
If they're throwing money out at me, I don't really say no. But yes, they toss, and I'm actually
This is the finest bulb we've ever produced.
Yes.
Grow it for me, Ted.
Some of it, I love hearing that. I'm going to make a shirt out of that, actually. And
I like it. Yes. Just the College Fellas plug. That's all you need to do.
Exactly. Hashtag it and everything, right? So they are from all over the world, and it gets a little bit muddy because we'll have companies here. So, for example, there's a company out of Chicago called Ball Horticultural Company, but they have holdings all over the world, and some of their subsidiaries are based out of the Netherlands or South Africa, for example. But then there are companies that are based out of Germany, and so it gets a little muddy in there of exactly where the product might have been developed, et cetera. But many of the companies are very international in scope. As far as like local, we do have local. I've heard of Plant Select by chance. Plant Select is a group of plants. It's an organization that started decades ago. Sorry, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but it's a partnership with CSU and Denver Botanic Gardens, and then other industry partners of finding, selecting, and introducing plants that do well in this Intermountain Range area. And so there are some, and those trials, Plant Select plants are usually more so in the perennial side of things. So we definitely have from very local organizations, companies to global and everything kind of in between.
That's fascinating. That's really cool. Very cool.
So you speak local, and where this is the Fort. It's northern Colorado really, but Fort Collins is having a pretty strong push towards xeriscaping landscapes and lots and things of that nature. Where are you on that kind of, I don't know, spectrum of like, man, I walked by a property on Sherwood today as I was walking to the College of Business, coincidentally, and this was a jungle of a house with all the plants and everything. I mean, it was right. Maybe you've seen, I don't know, but anyways, to pure like a rock, xeriscape, low water usage. What are your thoughts on kind of that? And is it possible and can it be beautiful?
Yes. So great answer for that is D, all the above. That's what I tell my students, like D, all the above. So I try to separate some level of my own personal influence or like what I would do. But the function of the trial gardens does provide opportunity for observation of plants that can fit into multitudes of landscapes. And so some of the plants we trial out there would absolutely fit and probably perform quite well under the xeriscape side of things. I don't sugarcoat it. There are plants out there that would completely fail in a xeriscape sort of situation. So it's at some level you have both sides of the spectrum, right? You have complete xeriscape side to non-xeriscape side, and then take any of the other concepts you want to talk about in planting and have a horticultural landscape, and you'll have both, and there's everything in between. And so I usually encourage folks to find your happy medium where it fits for you. Ideally, yes, we have to be concerned about water usage. I personally am in my current yard at home. I'm using this year to understand where my irrigation is, for one, which for much of this year hasn't really had to be on, thank goodness. I mean, that everyone's been telling me, like, Chad, this is not a typical,
This is not. No.
And I mean, like, I understand that, but I'm going to totally embrace this as my welcoming committee, right?
Yes.
Like, wonderful. So everything from, spring into summer at this point, and then actually even last winter was the most snow I've seen in a winter since I've been in Wisconsin, maybe one or two in New York. But anyways, I'm totally embracing that. But nonetheless, I'm like looking at my landscape and knowing how I'm going to plug in using less water. And part of my encouragement and my job is to help folks who want to go there identify plants that can do that. Or if folks aren't going to go there, well, here are some other plants that could certainly work. And so kind of coupled with that is out in the gardens, we do have the individual flower beds we have as like low, medium, or high water inputs. It's 1.5 and 1.5 inch water per week kind of a thing. And so we have the irrigation kind of set to that. So folks can kind of see some of the levels of water need for some of the plants. And I think we have room for opportunity to improve upon that and look at other irrigation styles and ways and things like that. So as I get settled, not only in those trial areas, but more like research-based, like disciplinary research-based of longer-term trials of looking at some more of that irrigation stuff, and like some of my colleagues are doing as well. And so, and how that relates to like ornamental plants, annuals, perennials, things like that. So
this kind of ties into my this perfect segue into the question I was going to go with from what Patrick said. So you're here in Fort Collins, come to the flower gardens.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go to our local nurseries, shout out Bath, Fort Collins, and grab some of these plants? So consider some of them are are coming from other parts of the world and they're trying them out. How does that, explain to our local residents how they can kind of go to a local nursery and potentially see what they see at the gardens and bring it to their own property?
Great question. So I'll start with like the annuals. Broad blanket is, yes, you should be able to find some of these in local markets.
Okay.
Whether it's independent garden centers, nurseries, or even big box stores. I do know, for example, so let me back up. So when we start to identifying these winners, right, the best ofs, and we advertise that out, and it gives the company something to market on. And so I observed this year, I will go to like independent centers, garden and floriculture centers, and big box stores, just so I can see what's coming out, make sure I'm following what the industry's doing. And I know, for example, at Lowe's and Home Depot, you can find pots that have Colorado recommended or some logo on there of that, like was a winner in the trials. So
that's very cool.
Yeah. So the companies are definitely recognizing that, and they're funneling it back saying, look, you probably maybe seen this either on the website or visited the trial gardens yourself. You saw that there last year or the year before. Look, this is the same, right? So feel free, you should feel comfortable planting this in your yard because, it was a good winner. So you can, I think the caveat to mention is you won't find them all, because some of the ones that are doing moderately okay just may not pick up enough traction that a grower is like, hey, I want to grow 10,000 of those. And so it's usually the ones that sift towards the top that you will see more regularly out there and available. I had another point to add there. And that works with the annuals. It works with perennials as well. And sometimes what we're trialing, most of the stuff you see out there, especially the annuals, is stuff that has been released, or it's like this is the first year it's being offered. So there might be, if it's good, it might be a little lag time in the sense you see it out there this year, it does well. So hopefully, chances are you would see it next year out in broader, more available in the market.
That makes sense. That makes total sense. No, that's good to know.
I like what you said earlier, and the philosophy that I have with my businesses and any position I've ever taken over is like, let's for your yard specifically, but I'm sure you've also made comments about how you feel there might be opportunity to get better for the trials. Is you're kind of sitting back, letting it understand how your yard and the irrigation system works, and I'm sure same thing with the trials. It's like, all right, it's my first grow season. Let's see how everything is doing. But you said that there's ideas that you've got run around your head as far as how it could potentially be better. Yeah. Where do you see some opportunity for future years?
Ooh, how long do we want to talk about? Lots. So there's you
just got to send this episode to all your students. That's all I want to make sure you do, and then quiz them on it. Say, hey, you got to listen to this, and then I'm going to quiz you on this episode.
At minute 433, what did he talk about?
Yeah. Sorry, go back.
Were you awake at minute 433? Absolutely not.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah. Go ahead and finish your answer. Sorry.
No, it's a great question because as we alluded to earlier, it's in northern Colorado, it's number 1 or number 2 tourist destination up here. And so I think personally, and I've chatted with some folks from, outreach and such, and I think there's a lot more opportunity we can do with the garden and having maybe another event or 2 or something like that, coupled with the garden. I'm a big proponent of having educational opportunities out there. I actually just had a meeting with Girl Scouts of America, one of the coordinators yesterday, about how we might be able to have some programming out there for Girl Scouts to get badges and stuff like that. And so as a horticulturist, as a member of the horticulture department, and I even had that role at K-State of, recruitment, bigger, broader, we have concerns about number of folks taking on agriculture careers. And underneath, we have horticulture embedded with that. And we have the same issue of getting enough quality people interested in horticulture. And so I look at these gardens as another opportunity to educate people, provide, opportunities to learn about our profession and agriculture as a whole. And frankly, at the end of the day, if it doesn't, persuade somebody to do horticulture, hopefully just garner more appreciation for horticulture and agriculture, and that, our industry is viable and there's value to it, right? And so I think, one of the ideas that I'll just kind of give folks maybe something to like, ooh, that's coming, is it's my bulb side, right? So you've probably seen lots of pictures of big bulb displays in the Netherlands. I think we could have large bulb displays out there in the gardens.
Let's do it.
We can have thousands of tulips out there, and we could have like a tulip or a bulb festival. And, I'm getting to know some of the local breweries, not the actual owners, but I'm getting to know breweries. But maybe there's a way to do like a flower brew and partner with them, and we can have large parties.
Chad, we'll help you organize this.
One of my favorite lattes that Starry Night had was a rose lavender latte, and I was like, oh, this is phenomenal.
Right. Like, so for example, tulips are actually edible. Tulip flowers, bulbs are too. I have no idea what, when you start fermenting tulip petals together and that sort of thing, what the ultimate outcome or taste would be, but there's opportunity, right? And whether we can partner with, fermentation sciences or other programs in the department, plus local community members, I just see a lot of opportunity to collaborate and cooperate on this and promote all of us,
I love that idea.
Departments, and if we are really ramping up that's the flower and art district, if they come into that part of town, how can we get them down to Old Town or to other parts of Fort Collins? So the longer they stay, ideally a bit more money they start dropping, right? So I think there's opportunities to do things like that. And so I've been chatting with my Dutch friends, and I'm going to have to figure out how we fund that sort of a thing, because one of the major things about this garden is it's a self-funding sort of a thing. So
CSU likes that, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yes. Good point.
I know that for sure, because the only real resources that go into that is paying part of my salary to help conduct it. But anything else that happens out there essentially is driven by the income from those entries. So when they pay us to do this, they're basically paying us just to maintain a level sort of ground of maintenance and upkeep and any sort of programming that happens out there. And so I'd like to be able to figure out a way to, maybe have a few more fundraiser events to really, because there's some things I would like to add to the gardens that will take a little bit of capital. But I think once we start processing that and I'm aiming to develop a plan, a short-term plan, a mid-term plan, and a long-term plan to go like, where can we go with these trail gardens? And where do we fit in with Fort Collins? Where do we fit in with Northern Colorado? And how do we, open up even more of that pipeline between here and Denver Metro of bringing folks up here and spending a longer weekend sort of a thing. So,
Patrick, you know what this means? We're going to have him back.
That's right.
I'm not going anywhere anytime soon.
No, we always give each other a hard time. I'm like,
so you've been here for 7 months. Have you enjoyed Fort Collins as a resident, not just applying for a job?
Right. Yeah, I have. And I mean, I'll be very honest. It's been very heavy on like I said, we got here a week before Christmas and I started teaching the immediately last semester. And so I've been terming it, drinking from the fire hose and being asked to break kind of a thing. But I do like Fort Collins. My partner likes Fort Collins. I'm honest with myself. Well, partly excuse. Most of the spring weekends were really rainy. And so it was kind of hard to go out.
Not normal, I will say.
Which is not normal.
Born and raised here.
Knowing how stressed I was embracing being able to feel not guilty, like saying, oh, I can sit in the recliner longer today at home, or, unpacking this box rather than going out on a hike or something. And so it's in my very near horizon to go purchase that fly rod that I said I'm going to start black fishing. And really start to carve out the time of one of the reasons why I moved to Colorado was to really enjoy the outdoors more. So, but I do enjoy it. I like it a lot. It's slightly different than Manhattan, Kansas. So it's a bigger city. And so, but finding that you find the pockets, you don't really feel the big city-ishness of it when you're kind of out in the little pocketed areas. It doesn't feel that big. So
yeah. That's great. That's great.
I've got two. So if you're good with it, Chris.
Yeah. I have one more question for Chad.
Let you go with the question, and then I'm going to finish us off with, I've got two finishing a tip that I'm going to ask for you from Chad, and then our final question.
That's kind of what I have I'm just selfishly going to ask you a tip for my garden.
That's what I was going to say. Okay. So we'll combine them.
This will be good. So I have a zero-scape yard. Okay. No grass. We and right, I said, we're on College in Prospect, right across 2 blocks from you guys.
Okay, yep.
And bulbs. Speaking of bulbs, which is kind of funny, when my wife and I went to Amsterdam, we went the end of March, early April. We missed the date of when everything bloomed by 2 days. We were so pissed. Mm-hmm. But for planting bulbs in Fort Collins, and specifically, I know you got to plant them like October, right? September, October. Yep. Can you give myself, the listeners, a little tips on planting bulbs, since you love them so much, and we're going to be doing it in our garden this year? When to plant them, what types maybe to go with, and get your thoughts on that.
This is podcast number 2 coming up right here. So
God,
this is where we do the break and do.
Good.
Yes. So for hardy bulbs, because there's usually 2 types of groups, and I won't go way into it. The ones we plant in the spring usually have to dig up, or you just replant every year. But the ones you're talking about for the fall, like the tulips, the daffodils, the hardy bulbs. And so good rule of thumb is mid to late fall. So as we start to see the leaves changing colors, you'll start to see them come out in the stores. And so as we start seeing the temperatures drop a bit, frankly, you could plant bulbs all the way into, if you had a late, if you were, too busy fishing or, camping or something, if you ordered bulbs and they hadn't come in yet, you could dig a hole, put the soil in the garage so it doesn't freeze, but you could plant in frozen ground and put it over the top if you're planting too late. Ideally, we can get it done before then, but basically you're planting late fall, and you're usually going to go, about 2 times. So if it's about 1 inch tall, the bulb is, you're going to go about 2 to 3 inches deep. So 2 to 3 times the size of the bulb deep. The smaller they are, the closer they can generally be near the top of the soil or soil. And then you just give them a good water in, and oftentimes give them a little bit of a root tone of feeder to get, because you're really trying to establish those roots in the fall. So in the spring, they can just flow through the ground.
And how many years do they come back? It's
a variable question.
Okay.
We break it up into the major groups. Let's just look at tulips and daffodils.
Let's just do tulips. Yeah, do the tulips and daffodils would be perfect.
Tulips and daffodils. Daffodils you can kind of expect for many years to perennialize. Many tulips, though, are usually 1 year, maybe 2 years, based on their bulb physiology and how they growing underneath the ground. You're more apt to see daffodils last much longer in the landscape than you are to see most of your tulips. Now, there are different types of tulips that will certainly perennialize or come back in regularly every year.
I love it.
That was pretty much my question was like, whatever plant I see, I kill. So I was
like, where's he going with this?
Fail out of your horticulture class faster than you'd ever realize.
It's all right. It's all right. Because a good horticulturist will actually kill plants and be like, oh, it's an opportunity for more. Right.
Ooh, that's all I've been trying to do is just an opportunity to replant different plants and understand their death cycle.
It's the silver lining.
But well, we finish off, and you've been here for 7 months, and it was a wet spring. But if you've had an opportunity to go enjoy any of the patios in Fort Collins, which would you say has been your favorite, and you find yourself going back to frequent?
I would say stodgy. I'm on that side of town, and I say that because I'm right here. I like the outdoor atmosphere of it. I love, obviously, beer. I like the vibe that's going on there, and it's fairly close to our. It's
a great vibe. Stodgy keeps coming up more and more.
It does.
It's like, because Odell was just like the front runner for song, and Odell's patio is wonderful, but Stodgy
it's great. I like that patio as well. I've taken, if I can find a time where it's not as busy, I've taken former students there and, grab one for lunch and whatever the food truck happens to be to grab some lunch. But Stodgy is what I can say that's the one we visited the most thus far. And we're gradually finding more and more places as we're getting out of places we like. So
I couldn't agree more. I think Stodgy, they turned that. I remember that building was for sale for like 2 or 3 years. And it was.
What was it before then? It was
like a firewood house or something.
Yeah, something really unusual.
It was weird. It was like 3 buildings that were basically like smashed together. It was just kind of like weird add-ons, and it sat there forever. And Stodgy came in, and just has crushed it there.
It's amazing, Chad. Thank you so much. I feel like CSU got really lucky. You're a huge addition to the Trial Gardens, and the last note I was just going to say is every school in this town should have a field trip to the flower gardens.
We can handle them, and I'll invite every school. Anybody that's listening, we are definitely open to that. I'm an educator.
That's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned.
Yep. We can accommodate that for sure.
Cool. So, and let us know when the Tulip Festival happens, because I will be front and center for the Tulip Festival.
You're right around the block, so you can come every day.
Yeah. Free party at my house.
Exactly. The Tulip Brew is at Chris's house.
The Tulip Brew. Oh my gosh. Really? We got some good names going on here. Well, Chad, thank you again so much. We can't that's all I got. I don't know. Patrick.
Thank you very much, Chad. I appreciate you.
I appreciate it. Glad to get to know some folks, and I'll look forward to the next episode. I'll start planning for it.
Love it.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks,
Take
Chris.
Care.
Patrick. Bye.